So this league, I wanted to challenge myself a little bit. I wanted to take the worst archetype in PoE, which is melee, bleed, gladiator, and see how far we can take it. See the types of build we can make. See if we can actually make like a good build out of it. And it took a little while to figure out like a good skill to build around and something that's like actually viable. But I think I found one, and it is Earth Shatter of Prominence. Okay, Earth Shatter of Prominence. So if we take the regular Earth Shatter here, we can see that Earth Shatter spits out these little fissures, and at the end of the fissures are little spikes. We can jump on the spikes, or we can Warcry the spikes, and they all blow up, and they do a lot of area damage, AoE damage, and they can overlap as well, right? So that's pretty cool. What Earth Shatter of Prominence does is that it only gives us one fissure with one spike at the end, and it still blows up and does AoE damage. But this fissure does a hell of a lot more damage. It does 109. It does 100% more damage and has 100 and something percent more AoE. It's actually 120% more damage with full quality. And the other thing that's really nice about it is that we can line these fissures up, or these spikes up, so we can overlap them 100%. So on bosses, we can get all those overlaps 100%. We don't have to worry about it. Or we can see with regular Earth Shatter, sometimes you might not hit the full overlap, right? The enemy has to be like pretty big for that to hit. And scaling AoE scales out the Earth Shatter, and not exactly just the overlaps. So that's what's really nice about this, is that we are getting both really good clear in terms of just how big the spike blows up, but also burst damage as well. And that is how I decided to kind of play this build, or build this build, is we're going to be building bleed, and we're going to be building half bleed and just regular burst damage, just for all physical damage. And we're just scaling it in terms of like two-handers, right? Just using an axe. I don't know if I want to keep going axe, or if I want to go to maul, or like a coronal maul or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, that's kind of what we're doing with this build. You can see here that none of this gear, we're straight out of Kitava, like a couple levels out of Kitava here, level 69. We have an axe with just physical essence that I found on like Act 3, and then we crafted on physical damage, so like a really terrible axe. All of our gear is really, really bad, just life and res. Really all of the damage is going to be coming from the mechanics of the build and the build itself. So let's just hop into a map so I can showcase it, and we can discuss some of the things here. We can really scale the bleed DPS pretty high with things like frenzy charges and usurper's penance. We'll get into the POB in a little bit, but as you can see here, the whole way we kind of play this build, we spit out these things, and then we just kind of blow these spikes up, and we can jump on them, or we can Warcry on them. Now I really want to make sure that we get a lot of cooldown recovery for our Warcries, because I do want to use the automated Warcry, which I think is going to really kind of help the quality of life on this build.
Can't do this just yet.
Just kind of having like those automated Warcries is going to be really nice. So one thing that I noticed is you saw there, I need a corrupting fever flasks. You saw there that sometimes when the enemies come into the range of the skill, it does look like they it kind of bugs out and they don't get hit. And I'm not sure if that's a bug or if that's just kind of how certain skills are, but that's something that's concerned me a little bit. But you can see here, it's a very quick playstyle because we have challenger charges, but it is a lot of buttons since we're pressing war cries, we're pressing our curse, we're pressing our fucking totem. I mean, it's a melee build, so it just kind of comes with the territory. All right, let's show you kind of how damage is on a boss. I'm gonna do this. We want to put down 5 of these bad boys and just kind of hit him with a big old burst. Now we really need him to move, okay? This is one of the big downsides of bleed. You need your guys to move. What's on this map? Just more life? Yeah, it's just more life. Oh, I'm using the wrong totem as well. Come on, baby. Run around, please. All right, there we go. All right, so there's kind of how the build works. You slam the ground, you cast a bleed, you keep going, okay? Now, one thing that's cool is that I've been trying to slam and then land on it as it slams for like really fast clearing. You can kind of see it there. The problem is that Leap Slam has like really small AoE, so you have to land right on top of it. I wonder if the other Leap Slam actually has better AoE. But that's just something that I've been trying to mess around with. If we can kind of get a good rhythm going, it could be fun in that way. But there's the build right out of Katava with a shitty axe, no gear, negative 60 chaos res. You can just see like the damage is enough. It's plenty, it's fine, it's good enough. And once we get better gear, it's only going to get better. We really don't need as much dot DPS as you need like hit DPS, so that's really nice. And when we look at the POB, the numbers are, we have enough numbers here to play around with and to make sure that we have like good defenses and that we're kind of quick because we have challenger charges and just creating like a well-rounded build. So this is the POB, this is the full POB and kind of the idea that I set it up on. It's very similar to an Earthquake build. So if we were to just like swap Earthquake in, you'll see the DPS is like very similar here. You know, the Earthquake doing this around the same amount of damage with the bleed doing almost exactly the same amount of damage. So very similar to like Earthquake bleed builds or Earthquake ailment builds. However, that's not accounting for that burst damage, right? This is only accounting for one spike. When we scale this up to 5 spikes overlapping, we do have to do this, 55% less attack speed. Now we can see, you know, we're getting a considerable amount more damage thanks to those spikes. And that's something that Earthquake just doesn't have, okay? Earthquake just doesn't have that mechanic in there built in. So that's something to think about there. You know, sometimes POB doesn't really tell the full story of a skill, and that's why you need to know how mechanics work and how the you know, AoE works and extra projectiles and stuff like that. That's where like a lot of these really good build makers, that's how they create really good builds, is because it really is just about knowing how to scale builds and the underlying mechanics of them. You can't just go off of POB numbers. A lot of time POB is not even correct in its numbers. So that's what we're doing here. This is the gear on this on the POB also. It's pretty good gear, but it's not crazy. It's all SSF viable gear. Our axe is just, you know, the same axe you would do with Bone Shatter, just farming essences, getting a T3 or T2 hybrid, T1 if you're lucky, crafting on Veiled Physical, and then crafting on attack speed and physical damage multiplier. I am using axes here. I am using a Vol axe here. I'm not 100% sure if I want to continue with it. Something I'll mess around in League is axes or maces, and scaling it with like just going even bigger on AoE and maybe even stun. That's something I've been thinking about. But that's it, right? This is a Circle of Guilt, so we can scale some Herald of Purity stuff, and then a Raslathis Coil, which is pretty... It is best in slot for a lot of bleed stuff. But I'm not 100% sure if I want to continue. We'll see, because I don't really like proccing the low bleeds. That doesn't feel good, especially when you have volatility in. It just makes it... It's just really rough when you don't hit like a really good bleed. So I'm hoping the DPS equals out in terms of feeling good with volatility and Raslathis. If not, we can just put something else in here. There's plenty of other skill gems we can put in there. The other thing that we're doing is we are scaling War Cries, okay? So the War Cries are in here: Seismic Cry, Intimidating Cry, Rallying Cry. These are the 3 War Cries that I'm using, and there will also be the automated War Cry gem here. So scaling War Cries and War Cry cooldown recovery is going to be important. For now, I'm just going to press them. It's a lot of buttons to press. I know a lot of people don't like that, but I'm not recommending you play this build. I told you, it's the worst archetype in the game. I just want to do it just because this is kind of how I have fun in PoE. But I'm hoping the Call to Arms gem with some War Cry cooldown recovery just makes it so every slam we get or every other slam we get, it goes off. That way it feels good. But we can. The reason why we're doing that is because you can see here, we can always have our max hit checked. Our exerted boost calc max hit just accounts for all of your War Cries being up, as opposed to an average of them being up and off of cooldown. This makes sure that you know, they're all on there, and that's why we have pretty good damage. And I think this Call to Arms gem really is going to help out melee and slam builds. The problem is that, you know, is it enough to really kind of make melee competitive? I don't know. There probably needs to be a little bit more or less of a cooldown on that stuff. That way we can have that way we can ensure that they're always on. Nonetheless, that's for another topic there. Rallying Cry because we do have Herald of Purities and we can put 4 allies there, and that's going to give us a nice little bit of damage. I just have 40 rage here just because we do get rage from our axes. The rage doesn't really do much for our damage. In terms of our auras, we really just have Herald of Purity, Blood and Sand, Flesh and Stone, and Determination. We have an Enlighten here. It doesn't need to be an Enlighten 4. But if we can't, if the mana just like feels like too much like shit with the War Cries, because mana is going to be a problem, and that's something that we're going to have to figure out, we can just drop Flesh and Stone and then mana's fine. You know what I mean? Like, we really don't need Flesh and Stone. I just have it in there. It's just kind of what bleed builds do, and it just gives us a little bit more damage. But at the end of the day, it's not really needed. And we have plenty of mana to go on to keep the War Cries on there. So yeah, that's what we're doing for our auras. Our curse is going to be vulnerability just because we are scaling bleed. I wish vulnerability was better in terms of like, I wish when you casted vulnerability that it made the enemy act as if it's moving, because that is really the worst part about this build, is that we're not running Crimson Dance. And I mean, if we're not doing that, we might have to weapon swap and cast Ensnaring Arrow, which is going to suck. But other than that, I mean, it's all just a very simple, just like physical melee type of build. The other thing is we have Challenger charges, and we are going to start in the end game. We are going to start scaling into Frenzy charges and scaling Usurper's Penance here, which is going to give us faster bleeds per Frenzy charge as well as just more damage per Frenzy charge. And then we can get more Frenzy charges on our rings and stuff like that. And that's kind of one of the ways that I think is going to scale this build really well in turn with those War Cries. I think that's just the way to go. I haven't found a better solution so far. But just on a league start, just on like having no gear, no clusters, no jewels, nothing like that. Yeah, I think it's gonna be okay. I think it's gonna be pretty good. Just like a true league start scenario where you just have nothing. Like this was the axe that I used throughout the whole campaign here. This was the whole campaign I used this axe. As soon as I got it, I was like, oh, nice. We're using this bad boy. And it carried me all the way to Kitava. And then in Kitava, I had this axe, or I bought this axe. And I threw one of my essences on there. And I made this. And now this can carry me all the way, as you can see, to yellows, to deep yellows. So we have damage, right? We just need to focus on survivability, quality of life, making sure the build feels good, and then worrying about like our end game pieces so we can start farming bosses and stuff like that, because I think that's going to play a lot bigger of a role next league. But yeah, so let's see if we can make this shitty ass archetype good. If we can make it great again, make Glad great again. You know, honestly, at the end of the day, it's better than any of these DD cucks out there. Any of these people that play Tornado Shot fucking every single league for every single year. Anything is better than those kind of builds. So that's how I feel about it. All right, peace.